So, hello to everyone listening and watching. I am Addae Moon, the Associate Artistic Director at Theatrical Outfit, and I am so honored to be speaking with some wonderful artists who are a part of the launch of our Made in Atlanta new play development program. And one of those artists is Osorio, who wrote the wonderful play Providence Canyon. Megan Tabaque, who wrote the wonderful play Marry Me, Bruno Mars, and our wonderful family and friend, the fantastic Melissa Foulger, who will be directing Bruno Mars. So, Megan and Lee, I want to start with you guys. And I want you both to talk about your pieces and talk about where the ideas came from, but also the development process that you've been involved in with those pieces leading up until now.
Sure. Take it away, Lee.
I don't. Oh, okay. So Providence Canyon is like 99.9% autobiographical. So I actually talk about how the play came about in the play. My brother texted me one day and asked me, "How much of an activist are you?" And said, "I need you to take one for the team." And he wanted to know if I would marry one of his clients to allow him to stay in the U.S. and not get deported. It's kind of joking, kind of not. He's an immigration attorney, and he had a 25-year-old gay Mexican national that was being detained in Stewart County Detention Center and looked like he was going to get deported because he had gotten a DUI, which sort of retracted his DACA status. And so I was like, sure. I mean, dating front's been a little dry these days, so I'll think about it if he's serious about it. Luckily, my brother got him off on a technicality, like ICE hadn't filled out his paperwork correctly, so we didn't even have to see if that was even possible for us to do. But it really got me thinking about the detention center, which actually is in one of my hometowns, the town where I spent the first 5 years of my life. And so it just kind of started me on this journey. I went to visit the detention center. That made me think about all the people that work there that, I used to be neighbors with. So I started meeting with detention center guards and really thinking about my own family's journey to this country. My dad's from Venezuela, and he came here when he was 7 years old. So the play basically traces that journey, and that's sort of where it came from. It had a lot of different forms talking about development. It was originally supported by the Riser Artist Lab through the Alliance Theater. So over the course of a couple of years, I developed it alongside Rachel Parrish as director and Angela Farr-Schiller as dramaturg. There were so many versions of the play. There was like a version where it was like an 18-person play, and now it's a one-person play. So that's performed by me. And after that development opportunity, I've had a couple of others. It was part of the Graham Martin Unexpected Play Festival at Theatrical Outfit and with working title Playwrights. And now I'm sort of in the final. I also went out to Vancouver to workshop it at the University of British Columbia with Leora Morris out there. And now it's having its sort of birth into the world of sorts. It's being performed at a Christian conference in North Carolina in November, and we'll have a one-night performance here in Atlanta before I head up there. So long-winded answer, but okay.
Yeah, how about you, Megan?
Not long-winded, perfectly winded, just the right amount of wind. Gosh, that's fantastic. I can't wait to see it. Yeah, I'm so excited to be a part of this festival. I'm really excited about the works and how they speak to, to the city and the artists here, because I'm a relatively new transplant. So yeah, so thinking about the beginnings of Marry Me, Bruno Mars, I was living in Denver, I believe, in the summer of 2021 when there were this terrible series of shootings just outside of the city at some of the spas, the Asian American owned spas out there, and it was a horrible thing to read about, and I sort of clocked it, and I was reading a lot of the texts and following up on the lives of some of the children of some of the workers who were lost in that incident, and really just sort of was tracking the story in a big way. And then a few months later, I found myself with a job in Atlanta as the resident playwright as part of Emory's fellowship program. So I was on my way here and invited to submit a piece to the Brave New Works Festival that Emory runs every other year. And I think the expectation is normally that the new playwright will sort of submit something they have in their back pocket or something I had been working on a little bit earlier. But with the support of the program here, I thought I would write a new piece for Atlanta, in Atlanta, and I knew it had to be about the people that I had been reading about all this time that had been involved in those shootings, and trying to get inside of why it was happening. And this is, and there and this was still kind of a heavier, more isolated pandemic time, and so like my life very, very much felt like it was being lived virtually, and the conspiratorialness of the internet and politics was sort of inescapable, and all of this sort of culminated in like, okay, so my play has to be about the people that own these spas. My play has to be about what is it inside of us that is inciting this kind of vitriol or sort of unplaced violence or anger that has nowhere to land. And so for me, it was an investigation into like, who are those people that were impacted, whose lives were lost, and like also in a strange kind of way of processing my grief, I'm really trying to humanize people that are, I think, radicalized by Twitter, or radicalized inside of moments of grief or pain in their own life, and they somehow find exactly the wrong voice to pull them up out of that. Yeah, so my play has only has this is this is a baby draft. This is still a fresh baby draft that I had the pleasure of working with Melissa on as part of the Brave New Works Festival. So this will be its like second appearance in the world. So I'm excited to get back into it while I'm still here in Atlanta, and sort of expand into not just the audience of Emory, but the audience of the city at large. That Theatrical Outfit sort of has rapport with. So that's really exciting to me. Bruno Mars also is in the play, is sort of this sort of bright pop star kind of rock light inside of a very heavy windowed subject. Like the internet doesn't just have these sort of deep, dark conspiratorial holes, but also there's like really exciting whole fandoms and sort of, viral videos. And he played the Super Bowl here. I think it was 2019. So I'm kind of just pulling stuff that feels really localized. It's really exciting to write about, like to write a play for a city. I don't know if we get that opportunity all the time, especially if if I'm not a New York player, I don't live in New York. Like I think this is a really exciting program, specifically for that reason. And I'll put a period on the end of my response to that.
No, it was great because I was at that reading at Brave New Works Festival and literally ran up to Melissa afterwards. I was like, look, how are we gonna get this thing on its feet? So Melissa, we have been in a lot of development rooms together. You've done a lot of development projects. What are some of the challenges of getting pieces from that development process to full productions at theater companies?
It's a couple of different things, I think. For me, the one is just visibility. It's getting the right people in the room to have the moment to say, how are we going to get this on stage? Which is one of the ways that I think it's how we make work. It's you see it and you go, that's something that needs to be heard. So there's that piece. There's also finding local stories and connecting with theaters that really are interested in local stories is something that is a little more difficult because a lot of theaters are right now are struggling. They're looking for things that are going to help their bottom line. And new work sometimes is scary for that reason, because you really have to take a chance on it, that impacts your box office sales, it impacts everything. So taking the leap of faith, I think, is something that in Atlanta, we do have a lot of theaters that are willing to do that. But that can be one of the impediments to getting things out into the world and getting to the place that it has a full production.
Lee, you're from this area, and Megan, you've been here for a while. Are there any, I guess, particular challenges about Atlanta when it comes to new work and to new play development that we probably should be, looking at and analyzing and maybe unpacking and deconstructing if need be?
I don't know if the challenges that we face are truly unique to Atlanta. I wish they were. I wish like, oh well, here's one solution that's gonna fix it for here, where we could look to what Minneapolis is doing, or we could look to what Seattle is doing, we could look to what New York is doing. Unfortunately, I think the problems that we face are the problems that are faced by development opportunities across the country, and I don't know about around the world. Maybe because of the funding systems are different elsewhere. The biggest challenge that I have faced is that our development opportunities aren't truly development opportunities. They are readings. And to me, as a playwright, there's a huge difference between those two things. I love to have my work have an audience, but it doesn't serve me very much. And I've heard this from other playwrights in the area as well. It doesn't serve me to have actors come in and read my work cold. My work is dense, and oftentimes, why I write for myself is because it makes it a lot easier to produce. I'm not necessarily looking to produce through a traditional venue. The Providence Canyon, I'm hoping, it's going to this Christian conference. It could be, put up in an afternoon in a church, in a synagogue, in a mosque, in someone's home, sort of following Out of Hands model of shows in homes. How do we get creative about getting our work out there in new ways is something I'm interested in, and less so about the sit down production that's going to cost $75,000 and look really pretty, but not necessarily have any more of an impact than a low budget DIY production would have. But back to my point about just getting a reading with actors who have maybe had 3 days of rehearsal or a week of rehearsal, that doesn't really allow me to develop the play. It just means I get to hear it again. So how do we have long-term commitment? So the Riser Lab, I think, tries to do that. They give $10,000. They give you all of this time, but there's not the staff in that program to actually birth the plays. They don't have the capacity, and frankly, they don't have the literary staff to do that. So I think, how do we look at long-term development, and how do we make sure that we have literary staff here in town that has the bandwidth to actually help these young writers like myself, like Mary Lynn Owen, like people who are really talented writers, but they just may not have an MFA. They may not have the rigor and the training to understand how to write. We have voices here that, with the right mentorship, I'm thinking of Quinn, I'm thinking of, Dana Stringer, there's incredible. I heard a piece today that she did at the opening of Maddie Freeland Park in my neighborhood. That was just amazing. How do we give them the long runway that isn't like, we need a production in March and you're going to start writing a new play in September, and the support to actually birth something that's going to get national attention. We have the talent. We just don't actually have the real development resources. No one's willing to fund that, and we don't have the staff for it. Literary staff, we have amazing people like you, Addae, but you are wearing 22 job hats right now. You can't be a dramaturg for a new play as you're being a dramaturg for stage productions, as you're, being associate artistic. It's just too much. So how do we, I think it's about time and staff for me.
Or it's really about having an entity kind of like the Playwright Center or LARC, or places that really only focus on that then support the larger community. And that's something that I think is missing here in Atlanta right now.
I think we have working title playwrights, which I think is a
Oh, yeah.
really fascinating model, and I'm glad that TO has taken them under their wing. How do we grow that? How do we allow people to hear more than 10 pages, 4 times a year? Because it's really hard to sort of, keep submitting your stuff and hearing a little bit at a time. So I'd be interested in building on the incredible work that they're already doing, because I think a lot of their opportunities are amazing, and I feel really, really, really fortunate to have benefited from several of them. But I think there's room for growth with future investment in what's already working about them and expanding it.
Yeah, I mean, my thoughts are, I've been here for a good, a good amount of time, but I still feel very much like I must pay my dues as an Atlanta theater artist. But what's exciting to me about this particular program and its launch, the Made in Atlanta sort of new play incubator program, I don't think there are enough regional theaters and storefronts sort of developing work for their audiences. Like there's a, the early dream, I think, of regional theaters was to cater to a local audience, right? And we have deviated from that in such a huge way. Like where there's people are still hungry for, like, the Hamilton tour, the Hadestown tour. We're hungry to get this window into cities that we're far away from. But the idea of making a pipeline for local artists to write about local subjects that impact a local audience, I think has the potential to build a kind of artistic community and artistic sort of loyal audience that I don't see happening in a lot of ways. So bridging that gap between like production and also the artists that are working on the ground to respond directly to what is happening in a place, like that's like what the Church of Theater should do, right? Like that is when you become like the pastor of your community and can make art that is actually really relevant, and exciting and joyful and also probing, and there's so many facets to that. So I think this program is doing a lot to sort of build us, like take us into a future that looks like that.
Oh, thank you for saying that, Mika. And we've already kind of touched on this, but as our last question, I just want to absorb as much wisdom from all three of you as possible. One of our hopes and dreams with the launching of Made in Atlanta is that it does become an entry point for the development of a new Southern dramatic canon. That's something that I'm extremely passionate and a little bullheaded about. But I would love to hear from each of you, just as a theater community, what are some things that we can do to empower ourselves to make sure that this sort of broad, diverse look at who we are as a region, who we are as a city, that this doesn't become a rarity, that this is something that happens all the time. What are some things that we can do to make sure that happens?
Big question. I mean, what are some things that we can do? Let me open with this, is like, as a playwright and an artist, I've had to, I've moved my life across the country so many times, and so it's been a real gift to be in Atlanta for an extended period. And I will say the audiences here are the most diverse audiences I've ever seen, ever. I lived in Chicago and I've lived in Austin, and like the segregation across the city, across all municipal sectors and then art sectors is so stark. And here it does not, that separation does not feel, it isn't here in the same way. And so that seems like an incredibly valuable resource to tap and take advantage of and really sort of lead the charge when it comes to DEI initiatives, and demonstrate what that really looks like, because it feels like the community here is doing it already. And it's not as frightening as it is in other like spaces that are predominantly white institutions. Like, yeah, I think that's the end of my thought, but it feels like that there's a model there where that can sort of launch, places like Theatrical Outfit and the Atlanta theater scene should be in the spotlight more, because a Southern canon and a Southern community and a Southern artistic practice is doing something better than they're doing in Chicago, than they're doing in Austin and these other places that I've been.
Yeah, I'll just piggyback on that. And I think I'll just say, first of all, recognize that we are special, like, and not just our arts community, but I'll speak to Atlanta specifically, because that's what I know best, just having spent the most time in Atlanta and the metro area over the course of my life. And even though I've been to New York and I've lived in there and I've lived in Seattle, I've lived in Omaha, I've chased boys a lot of places, into other countries, Canada briefly. But like, Atlanta is special, and I keep trying to like run away from it, but like I can't, because the racial relations in this town are so complicated. But there's a way, and not to like sugarcoat it at all, because it's not sugarcoated, especially when you combine race and economics, right? Like then you're looking in through a whole different lens. But there's a way in which like we are more able to confront things because we recognize our past, more than a place like in Boston where they're like, oh, well, our past is, Paul Revere, and like, I don't know, he was Connecticut. I don't know where he was. Anyway, like Revolutionary War, I don't study their history. Who knows? But like, they're like, we don't have a problem with race, and they're not really willing to look at how big a problem with race they actually have. And our city is more integrated than a place like Chicago, which still feels very segregated. Like there is mixing in both places, obviously, but like here, like we're in it together, even as there's still that tension. So I think we're uniquely positioned to have these conversations. And the South is just, the history here is just so rich with complicated, complex nuances that we need people to talk about, which you don't get in a New York City where everything is like moneyed and new and like fairy tale life of, we know those stories. How do we get into the nuances of what is Southern? So I think recognize we're special. 2, stay. Don't go. You no longer have to. I mean, like, you can see in the background, my audio book recording booth, this is how I make my money. I write on the side, I do TV and film. Like I'm on stage when I feel like it, because, theater doesn't pay anything. But like you can make a life here. So there's no need to go to New York or go to LA. Stay here. We are launching Oscar worthy actors out of Atlanta. Danielle Deadweiler is, like, you don't have to go to those other places. So stay, create. So recognize you're special, stay, and create. Like, I think we still do have that inferiority chip on our shoulder. Like, we're not New York, we're not LA, or like, but that's a good thing. In New York, if you're an actor, you really have to be an actor. If you're a director, you have to be a director. Like, they put you in a box. Here in Atlanta, I have been able to be whatever the heck I want to be and be supported in that. And like, so if you have a story that you want to tell, create, find, and then the last thing I'll say is just support each other as you're creating. So there's so much space in Atlanta. Still, things are getting more expensive. Rent is hard, but like, there's still so much space. We have so much more room for so many more companies. So like, I don't know why, you mentioned the word storefront earlier, Megan, and I don't know why we don't have more storefront theaters. We have all the space in the world. Or, Windmill Art Center is always available to rent. Push is building new space. Like, there are places in Southwest Atlanta that are so affordable for you to just put up your own work. So try it. And support people financially that are trying it. So yeah, I think those are like some really simple things we can do. Stop looking to New York, stop looking to LA, stop moving there, stay here, set down roots, understand the community, live in the community. I love this idea of using plays as a church, that Megan mentioned, because you have to be embedded in the community to have any kind of like respect. And I think that's especially true in Atlanta. Like, don't come from New York and try and tell me an Atlanta story. You don't know me, like, and you don't know the South, and you're coming in with all of these judgments about what the South is. But we're uniquely positioned to tell our own stories, which are, again, nuanced, complex, and fascinating. So I hope that more people take on that charge. And I know you are, Addae. I'm like, we're all, and Melissa, you're supporting this work. And Megan, stay. Don't go anywhere else. Stay. Stay here and be a part of this, because I think it's a really exciting moment to be in Atlanta.
I don't think I can top that. Lee said it all. The one thing that I'll go into a hope, because I think Lee really encapsulated what we are. My hope is that we continue to grow funders who understand process. And I think that that's one thing that's still really missing. Everybody wants to fund the big sparkly project that you will see on stage. There's not as many people who are interested in funding. How do we get to the place of creating those? How do we support playwrights? How do we support artists who really want to make the work that is the new Southern canon? And that's something that I feel like we need to charge ourselves with, to be able to talk about, to be able to advocate for, and to hopefully ultimately get, because that's how we're really going to grow our stories in a way that we really need to. And then how do we get those stories onto a national stage becomes a question, because here we understand our stories and it's comforting to tell them, and we'll be able to teach people what it's like to be in Atlanta, and what it's like to tell stories of the South, to tell stories of race, to tell stories of our own version of magical realism and ritual, and things that are just innately part of Southern culture. And that's something that I think is invaluable to the larger picture of theater storytelling as well.
Ooh, I just feel like I just got a sermon today, y'all. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, stay, create. Atlanta is really a special place. And to quote a famous, brilliant, Atlantan, Andre 3000 from Outkast, the South's got something to say. The South's got something to say. And I really thank y'all for being a part of this launch, and for your wisdom and insight. And hopefully all of you that are listening to this or watching this will come out and support this work. Support Atlanta-based theater artists who are all involved in every facet of this entire project, and to continue to support the development of new stories that tell the diversity and the vast range of who we are as a city, as a region. Thank y'all so much. Appreciate you.
Thank you, Addae.
What are the dates? Let's give can we give?
Oh, yes, get the dates, y'all.
I will say Providence Canyon is going to be performed at Roll Call Theater on November 1st, 7:30. Tickets are $10, but if you need help getting a ticket, just email me or DM me on Instagram. I'll get you a ticket. We will make it happen, because that should never be a barrier for any of my work for you coming to it. I'd rather have your butt in the seat, and I'll pay for your parking, whatever we need to do to get you there. I'll give you a ride. Let me know. We'll make accessibility a thing. But mine's November 1st at 7:30 at Roll Call Theater, which is in Pont City Market, right next to Pancake Social.
Ours is November 19th. We have not nailed down a time just yet, have we? Did
we say 2 p.m.?
What?
Did we say 2 p.m.?
We made it 2 p.m.
Probably at 2, yeah. We're gonna
So November 19th, 2 p.m. and we're gonna do that at Emory?
Yeah, on Emory campus at the Schwartz Performing Arts Center. The Schwartz.
So please come and support these two wonderful pieces by these two wonderful artists that tell very different stories about the city and this region. Thank y'all so much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.